If Robert Wills had understood what his wife was really asking that night, he wouldn't have answered so calmly. Because sometimes a marriage doesn't end when someone cheats. Sometimes it ends when someone starts looking for permission to. And Robert didn't realize that the question Gabriella asked him that evening wasn't curiosity. It was preparation. And he was about to become the last person to understand it. Robert Wills was 34 years old when his carefully structured life began developing cracks he couldn't yet see. From the outside, everything looked stable. The kind of marriage people assume is safe from betrayal. No drama, no volatility, no chaos. Just two adults building a future. He met Gabriella when he was 30 and she was 29. Their relationship developed slowly and deliberately over nearly 4 years before marriage. No breakups, no trust violations, no emotional games. Just consistency. Gabriella seemed like the type of woman who valued stability over excitement. She wasn't drawn to luxury or attention. She believed in planning, discipline, and long-term thinking. At least, that was the version of her Robert believed he married. Their life followed the kind of rhythm most people spend years searching for. Shared routines, mutual respect, predictable comfort. Friday dinners they cooked together. Saturday morning errands followed by coffee. Occasional short trips when schedules aligned. Nothing spectacular, just safe. And Robert believed safety was what real love looked like after the honeymoon phase ended. They spoke seriously about their future. Children within a few years. Moving into a better neighborhood. Eventually buying a house in an area known for excellent schools and long-term property value growth. Robert approached it analytically. Spreadsheets, savings targets, investment timelines. Gabriella approached it emotionally. Interior ideas, lifestyle planning, future routines. It felt balanced. Like two people building something permanent. Or at least that's what Robert thought. If anyone had asked him then whether he trusted his wife, he wouldn't have needed even a second to answer. Yes, completely. One of the reasons was something Gabriella had done years earlier. She had cut off a longtime friend after discovering that friend was secretly involved with someone already in a relationship. Robert still remembered what Gabriella told him afterward. Integrity doesn't depend on who's watching. At the time, that sentence strengthened his trust. Later, it would become something else entirely. The first year of marriage didn't bring dramatic changes. If anything, things felt natural. Then life settled. Responsibilities increased, schedules tightened, excitement slowly transformed into reliability. But reliability wasn't the danger. Influence was. And Robert didn't yet realize how quietly influence can reshape someone. If he had to identify where things began shifting, he would always return to one event. Gabriella changing jobs. At the time, it felt like progress, higher income, better career trajectory, more opportunity. Robert was genuinely proud of her. They celebrated the offer the night she accepted it. Takeout, wine, long discussion about how this would accelerate their financial goals. He thought this was momentum. In reality, it was the first small fracture line. The new workplace culture was different from what Gabriella was used to. Younger teams, high social dynamics, regular after-work gatherings that blurred professional and personal boundaries. At first, Gabriella kept her distance. She mentioned invitations but declined most of them. Robert admired that. It showed priorities. Or so he believed. Eventually, she started attending occasionally, then more regularly. Her explanations were always reasonable. It helps with internal visibility. I don't want leadership thinking I'm disconnected. This is just how advancement works here. Robert accepted every explanation. Because trust makes you interpret change as growth, not risk. That's when new names began appearing in conversations. Kim Collet was one of the first, outgoing, confident, socially influential in the office. Gabriella described her as someone who understood how to move up quickly. Robert didn't think much about it. At the time, she was just another coworker, not a factor. Another name appeared more often soon after. Stefan Anderson, someone from a different department who often joined their group outings. According to Gabriella, he was smart, well-connected, and ambitious. Again, Robert registered the information but assigned no meaning. He had no reason to. Trust filters information differently. The behavioral changes were gradual. Later evenings, more phone activity, stories involving people Robert had never met. Nothing alarming on its own. But patterns rarely start as alarms. They start as background shifts. And Robert wasn't listening closely yet. Then came the conversation he would later replay endlessly. They were finishing dinner on an ordinary weeknight when Gabriella asked, "Do you ever wonder if we committed too early?" Robert paused. That wasn't small talk. That was philosophical positioning. "What do you mean?" he asked carefully. Gabriella shrugged lightly, but her tone sounded too neutral. "I just think some people experience more before settling down. Sometimes I wonder if we skipped that stage." The way she said it felt practiced, not spontaneous. Robert answered honestly. "I don't feel like I missed anything," he said. "I chose what mattered to me." He expected that answer to close the topic. Instead, Gabriella simply nodded, like she was processing a different conclusion. That unsettled him more than disagreement would have. That night, Robert stayed awake longer than usual. Not because he suspected betrayal, because he sensed emotional distance. And distance is usually the first real warning. Not arguments, not secrets. Distance. Much later, Robert would understand something most people only realize after damage is already done. Relationships rarely collapse because someone suddenly changes. They collapse because someone slowly adopts new definitions of happiness, new priorities, new influences, and sometimes new permissions. At that moment, Robert still believed they were moving forward together. What he didn't understand yet was that Gabriella had already begun moving in a different direction. And very soon, he was going to find out exactly how far. Gabriella just gave a small shrug, like the question wasn't dangerous, like she wasn't quietly testing the boundaries of their marriage. "People at work are always doing new things," she said. "Traveling, meeting people, living differently. Sometimes it makes me wonder if there's more out there I haven't experienced." Robert listened carefully, but he misunderstood completely, because he was still thinking like a husband building a future, not like someone about to defend one. Robert didn't feel that kind of curiosity. What he wanted was simple: stability, a family, a predictable life with the woman he trusted. Parties didn't interest him. Random experiences didn't interest him. Security did. So he interpreted her words through his own values, which is exactly what people do right before they miss the warning signs. He thought she meant travel, new places, new cultures, new shared memories, something they could experience together. So he leaned forward slightly and asked, "What kind of things do you feel like you're missing?" Gabriella hesitated just a fraction too long, then said, "I don't know. Just experiencing more of life." Robert nodded, trying to be proactive, trying to be the good husband. "I think we might just need a real vacation," he said. "We've both been working too much." That seemed to interest her. "Maybe somewhere historic," she said. "Like where?" he asked. Her face lit up slightly. "Greece." Robert smiled. He thought he had solved the puzzle. He even felt a quiet sense of pride, like he had correctly diagnosed a small relationship maintenance issue before it became a problem. If only he had understood what problem she was actually describing. For the next few weeks, everything appeared normal. Gabriella was still affectionate, still engaged in conversations, still physically present. But something subtle had changed. A small emotional delay in her reactions. Moments where she seemed mentally elsewhere. At the time, Robert explained it logically. Work stress, adjustment to new responsibilities, nothing unusual. Looking back later, he would realize distance had already begun. About 5 weeks after that dinner conversation, the subject returned. This time more directly. They were sitting on the couch watching a series they had been following together. Halfway through the episode, Gabriella muted the TV. That alone was unusual. She turned toward him. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to be open-minded." That sentence alone activated something in Robert's instincts, because people rarely ask for open-mindedness before saying something safe. "What is it?" he asked carefully. She studied his face for a moment, then asked, "Have you ever heard of couples giving each other freedom passes?" Robert didn't answer immediately. He knew the term. But hearing it inside his own living room felt unreal. "What do you mean by that?" he asked, buying time. Gabriella explained calmly, almost academically, like she was presenting a modern relationship philosophy rather than asking permission to cross a boundary. "Some couples allow each other to explore temporary connections," she said, "so they don't end up resenting each other later for missing out." Robert said nothing. He just watched her, waiting. because he already knew where this conversation was going. Gabriella continued carefully. I think mature couples should at least be able to talk about things like that honestly, instead of pretending attraction to other people doesn't exist. Still, Robert didn't respond. Silence can sometimes force honesty faster than arguments. Eventually, Gabriella stopped circling the subject and said what she really meant. I would rather talk about this than ever end up cheating because I felt trapped. The sentence landed like controlled damage. Calm delivery, devastating implication. Robert felt something cold move through his chest. Not rage, not yet. Just clarity. She wasn't asking a theoretical question. She was negotiating terms. He took a breath before responding. Is there someone specific you're thinking about? Gabriella didn't answer right away. That silence confirmed more than any confession. After several seconds, she exhaled slowly. There is someone at work. Robert already knew, even before she said another word, because there had only been one name she spoke about with that particular tone of respect. Stefan Anderson. Stefan was the second reason Robert would later blame her new job for everything that followed. Gabriella had mentioned him many times, always professionally, always respectfully. She described him as competent, efficient, reliable, someone who solved problems instead of creating them. Robert had never been threatened by that. At the time, it sounded like professional admiration. Now it sounded different, because admiration is often where attraction quietly begins. When Robert said Stefan's name out loud, Gabriella didn't deny it. She just shifted into justification. I didn't plan this, she said. It just happened naturally. That sentence always appears when someone wants something they know they shouldn't want. She explained that they had developed what she called a connection, that they worked well together. Those conversations felt easy, that she was curious whether it meant anything. Curious. That word stayed with Robert, because curiosity is often how people rename temptation. I just want the chance to understand what this is, she said carefully. Robert stared at her, trying to process how calmly she was discussing the possibility of stepping outside their marriage. You can't be serious, he finally said. Gabriella looked genuinely confused by his reaction, which disturbed him even more. Why are you reacting like that? She asked. Because you're asking permission to test another relationship while we're married, Robert said flatly. Gabriella shook her head slightly. No. I'm trying to be honest instead of dishonest. That sentence revealed something important. Her internal justification had already happened. She wasn't deciding, she was informing. At that moment, Robert understood something painful. This conversation wasn't about whether she would develop feelings. That had already happened. This conversation was about whether he would quietly accept it. And he wasn't ready to answer that yet. Robert didn't raise his voice. That surprised Gabriella. Most people expect anger when they push too far. What they don't expect is calm. And calm is far more dangerous. So let me understand this correctly, Robert said slowly. His voice was controlled, measured, almost clinical. You're asking me to approve of you being with another man. Gabriella immediately reacted. That's not what I'm saying. Robert didn't interrupt. He just watched her. People often reveal more when they feel the need to defend themselves. I'm trying to be honest instead of dishonest, she continued. Cheating involves lies. I'm doing the opposite. I'm being transparent. Robert nodded slightly. You're using better vocabulary for the same thing. She frowned. What does that mean? It means, Robert said calmly, you can call it exploration, connection, or emotional freedom. But you're still asking me to approve something we never agreed our marriage would include. Silence settled between them. Robert leaned forward slightly. Our marriage was always monogamous, he continued. That was never negotiable. We didn't build this on optional loyalty. Gabriella crossed her arms. People evolve. Robert gave a small nod. Values usually don't. She tried another angle. I'm not doing anything wrong by talking about it. No, Robert agreed. You're doing something wrong by positioning it like I should accept it. That irritated her. I'm trying to be mature. Robert looked directly at her. No, he said quietly. You're trying to renegotiate the rules after benefiting from them. That landed harder than shouting would have. Gabriella's tone changed slightly. I can't control developing feelings, Robert answered immediately. You can control what you do with them. That was the first real shift in power, because Robert had stopped defending and started defining. She hesitated, then said something revealing. If I don't have a healthy way to process this, I can't promise I'll never make a mistake. There it was, the indirect threat. Robert felt something inside him settle, not break. Settle. Clarity often feels cold. So what you're saying, he replied evenly, is either I approve this, or you might eventually justify doing it anyway. Gabriella didn't answer, which was an answer enough. For the first time, irritation appeared in Robert's voice. Not loud, but sharp. That's not honesty, he said. That's pressure. Gabriella shook her head. You see everything in black and white. No, Robert said. I just see what you're trying to normalize. Then another piece clicked into place. Was this your idea, he asked, or Kim's? Gabriella's reaction was immediate. Too immediate. What does Kim have to do with this? Robert didn't smile, but internally something confirmed. Because suddenly you're using language that sounds exactly like the things you've said she talks about. Gabriella didn't respond, and silence confirmed influence faster than denial ever could. Robert continued quietly. Let me guess. She told you traditional relationships are outdated. Gabriella looked irritated now. She's just open-minded. Robert nodded slightly. Open-minded people usually don't need other people's marriages to validate their choices. That hit. The room grew quieter. Then Robert asked the question he already knew the answer to. Does Stefan know how you feel? Gabriella hesitated. Again. That hesitation told him everything. We've talked, she admitted. Robert felt something shift permanently. You discussed your attraction to each other while you were still married to me? Gabriella tried to soften it. It wasn't like that. Robert didn't argue. Emotional investment usually starts before physical decisions, he said. That observation made her uncomfortable, because it was accurate. That was when Robert realized something important. This wasn't about curiosity anymore. This was about permission, and he wasn't going to give it. I need some space, he said finally. Gabriella looked irritated. We should talk like adults. Robert stood up slowly. No, he said calmly. Adults understand the consequences. That was the first real boundary. He walked toward the hallway, but Gabriella's next sentence stopped him. We can talk when you're ready to be mature about this. That did it. Robert turned back, not angry, certain. You want honesty? He said. Here it is. She watched him carefully now. If you want to be with Stefan, Robert continued, you don't need my permission. Her expression changed instantly. Hope, relief, anticipation. Robert noticed all of it. But, he continued, you won't do it as my wife. The relief disappeared. You can be single, he said, or you can be married, but you don't get both. She stared at him. We're just talking, she said. No, Robert replied calmly. You're testing whether I'll tolerate disrespect. For the first time, she looked uncertain. I think you're overreacting. Robert shook his head slightly. No, I'm reacting exactly enough. Then he said something that changed the dynamic permanently. Respect isn't lost when someone cheats. Gabriella frowned. When is it lost? Robert answered. When someone asks permission to betray you and expects you to cooperate. Silence filled the room. The rest of the night dissolved into fragments, accusations, deflections, name-calling. She called him insecure, needy, controlling. Robert didn't respond, because once someone starts insulting your boundaries, they've already confirmed why those boundaries are necessary. He went into the bedroom and closed the door, not dramatically, not angrily, decisively. Gabriella knocked, then argued, then softened her tone, then tried reasoning again. Robert said nothing. Eventually, she stopped. That night, she slept in the guest room, and without discussion, that became the new reality. Something fundamental had changed. Not because she asked, because she insisted. Over the following days, Gabriella tried reopening the conversation. Robert refused, not out of revenge, out of clarity. Some subjects aren't disagreements, their fault lines. And Robert already knew something Gabriella hadn't realized yet. Once someone starts negotiating exceptions to loyalty, they rarely stop at one. By the end of that week, one thought had settled clearly in his mind. This marriage might already be over. He just hadn't completed the paperwork yet. Robert didn't react emotionally, he reacted structurally. And that's when the real power shift began. Because arguments are emotional, strategy is quiet. And Robert had stopped arguing. He had started preparing. The very next morning, he scheduled a consultation with a divorce attorney. Not because he was certain, because he wanted clarity. The lawyer listened carefully as Robert explained everything. The question, the request, Stefan, the justification. When Robert finished, the attorney didn't hesitate. "Your marriage is already structurally broken," he said calmly. Robert didn't react. The lawyer continued. "She's not asking for permission. She's asking to keep security while she evaluates alternatives." That sentence removed the last illusion Robert still had. Over the next few days, Robert also spoke to a small circle of people he trusted. His older sister, 2 close friends, 1 colleague who had gone through divorce before. Their reactions were almost identical. Shock, the clarity. Nobody told him he was overreacting. Nobody told him to fight for the marriage. Instead, they all said variations of the same thing. "She's already halfway out." That hurt. But clarity often does. Meanwhile, Gabriella kept trying to restart conversations. Different strategies each time. Reasoning, emotional appeals, subtle blame, occasional guilt. Robert followed his lawyer's advice precisely. Minimal interaction, no emotional discussions, no reactive arguments, only necessary communication, and always calm. That frustrated Gabriella more than anger would have, because anger is engagement. Calm withdrawal is controlled. Then the manipulation attempts began. First came reframing. "You're destroying our marriage over a conversation." Robert didn't respond. Then came blame shifting. "You're emotionally shutting down." Still no response. Then came provocation. Small comments designed to trigger reaction. Robert started documenting everything, not dramatically, quietly. Phone recordings. Saved messages, notes of conversations. Not for revenge, for protection. The lawyer had warned him. When someone realizes they're losing control of the narrative, they often escalate emotionally. Documentation protects you. Robert followed that advice exactly. Every time Gabriella tried to start an argument, he disengaged. Every time she tried to provoke emotion, he withdrew. Every time she pushed, he created distance. That changed the dynamic completely. What Gabriella didn't realize was that her social narrative was also beginning to shift. Mutual friends were starting to learn what had happened, not through Robert attacking her reputation, through simple facts. And facts travel differently than accusations. Kim tried defending Gabriella within their social circle, framing it as modern relationship thinking. That worked briefly, until people heard the full situation, including Stefan. And that's when something unexpected happened. Stefan pulled away, not dramatically, quietly. Because attraction is exciting, complication isn't. Once he understood that Gabriella's marriage was collapsing around the situation, his interest cooled. He stopped messaging as often. Group conversations replaced private ones. Professional tone replaced personal curiosity. Gabriella noticed immediately, and panic began replacing confidence. Kim tried encouraging her, telling her Robert was controlling, that she deserved freedom, that she shouldn't feel guilty. But Kim wasn't the one losing a marriage, and she wasn't the one losing stability. Encouragement is easy when consequences belong to someone else. Meanwhile, Robert continued moving forward. He secured his own apartment, moved gradually, separated finances cleanly, filed paperwork calmly. No drama, no revenge, just execution. That unsettled Gabriella more than anything else, because she had expected negotiation, not finality. When the divorce process began, Gabriella changed tactics again. Victim positioning. She told people Robert was rigid, emotionally inflexible, unable to handle difficult conversations. But the documentation Robert kept told a different story, and reality tends to outlast narrative. The legal process moved faster than Gabriella expected. Short marriage, independent incomes, no children, no complex assets, no alimony. Clean separation. When the judge finalized everything, Robert didn't feel victory. He felt closure. Gabriella didn't, because something else was becoming clear. Stefan wasn't waiting, Kim wasn't helping, and Robert wasn't coming back. That's when the psychological collapse began. For the first time, Gabriella tried reversing direction, suggesting they might have moved too fast, that maybe things could have been worked out. Maybe she had only been confused. But Robert had already crossed the mental line. And once someone reaches clarity, confusion no longer persuades them. Even after everything was finalized, she tried one last argument. "You ended a marriage over a hypothetical," Robert answered calmly. "It stopped being hypothetical when you named someone." She had no answer to that. What hurt Gabriella most wasn't losing Robert. It was losing certainty. Because she had believed she could explore without losing stability. Instead, she lost both. And reality rarely negotiates after decisions are made. Robert didn't celebrate. He didn't feel triumphant. He just felt finished. Finished with confusion, finished with negotiation, finished with trying to convince someone to value what they already had. And for the first time in months, he slept peacefully. Robert wasn't sure why Gabriella kept trying to reopen the conversation. She had what she said she wanted. Freedom, no restrictions, no marriage, no obligations. And yet she kept reaching out. At first he thought maybe she regretted her decisions. Later he realized something else was happening. She wasn't trying to fix the past. She was trying to fix her conscience. Robert eventually agreed to meet her one last time. Not to reconcile, not to argue, not to reopen anything. Just to close the final psychological door. They met at a small cafe not far from the apartment they once shared. Neutral territory, public, safe. Gabriella arrived early. When Robert walked in, she smiled politely. Like two former colleagues meeting after changing companies. Not like two people whose marriage had collapsed. That alone told him how differently they now saw reality. They ordered coffee. Gabriella began talking almost immediately. How sad she was that things ended this way. How everything had escalated unnecessarily. How maybe things could have been different if he had been more willing to communicate. Robert just listened. No interruptions. No corrections. When she finished, she looked at him expectantly, waiting, hoping, probably expecting him to finally validate her version of events. Instead, Robert said something she wasn't expecting. "I think we should get a few more perspectives." She frowned. "What do you mean?" Robert didn't answer immediately. He simply took out his phone and made a video call. When Gabriella saw who appeared on the screen, the color left her face. Her parents. "What are you doing?" she whispered urgently. But it was too late. They had already answered. Robert had warned them he might call. They had been waiting. Robert stayed calm, respectful, precise. "Gabriella wanted to discuss why our marriage ended," he said. "I thought it would be fair to include people whose opinions she values." He then turned the phone toward her. "Why don't you explain what you explained to me?" She couldn't. For the first time since everything began, she had no language. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. Robert responded simply, "I'm just telling the truth." When she couldn't speak, Robert explained. Clearly, factually, without exaggeration, without emotion. He explained the request, the coworker, the justification, the pressure, the boundaries. Her parents said nothing while he spoke. That silence became heavier than anger. When he finished, her father covered his face with one hand. Her mother asked only one question. "Is this true?" Gabriella tried to soften it. "It's not that simple. It was just a conversation." "It was about honesty," her father interrupted. "Did you ask your husband for permission to be with another man?" Gabriella said nothing. That silence answered everything. Her mother's voice broke slightly. "I thought we raised you to value commitment." Gabriella tried again. "It's how relationships work now." Her father shook his head. "No," he said. "That's how people justify bad decisions." Then he stood up and walked away from the camera. Her mother stayed a moment longer, disappointed, confused, quietly hurt. Then she ended the call. The cafe suddenly felt very quiet. Gabriella stared at Robert. "You didn't have to do that," Robert answered calmly. "You said it wasn't wrong." She had no reply. Then she noticed something else. People nearby had heard parts of the conversation. Not everything, just enough. Reality had become public. For the first time, Gabriella looked embarrassed. Not defensive, embarrassed. She stood abruptly. "I need to call my parents." And she left, quickly, without finishing her coffee. Robert stayed, finished his drink, sat quietly for a few minutes, not feeling victory, not feeling revenge, just feeling finished. The next day her parents called him. They apologized. Robert didn't let them. "This wasn't your fault," he said. "People choose their own influences." He didn't mention Kim by name. He didn't mention Stefan. But they both understood. After that day, Gabriella stopped contacting him. Maybe she understood there was nothing left to convince him of. Maybe she realized she had lost the narrative she was trying to protect. Either way, silence replaced arguments. And Robert welcomed it. For the first time in months, his life became simple again. Work, training, friends, routine, peace. Not exciting, but honest. Did he wish things could have been different? Of course. If Gabriella had come to him and said she felt distance, he would have fought for the marriage. If she had said something felt broken, he would have tried to repair it. But she hadn't asked to fix something. She had asked to replace something. And that changes everything. Robert eventually understood something important. He didn't end his marriage because of a hypothetical. He ended it because his wife had already emotionally stepped outside of it. She just wanted permission to make it official. She didn't want freedom. She wanted freedom without consequences, excitement without risk, exploration with a safety net. She wanted to test another future, while keeping the one she already had. Robert did the one thing she didn't expect. He removed himself from the backup plan. And sometimes, that's the only move that protects your dignity. That chapter cost him months of emotional energy, but it gave him something more valuable: clarity and peace. What he learned was simple. Love cannot exist where respect becomes negotiable. Loyalty cannot survive where alternatives are being evaluated. And maturity isn't asking permission to betray someone. It's having the discipline not to. Because in the end, the strongest people aren't the ones who fight hardest to keep someone. They're the ones strong enough to walk away when staying would cost them their self-respect. And sometimes, the real beginning of your life starts the moment you refuse to be someone's second option. If this story made you feel something, hit that like button. Drop a comment telling us what you would have done in the main character's place, and subscribe to Sinner Stories so you never miss a new video.